So this picture here, you have, it just illustrates the Great Migration. They were going to big cities, Chicago, Kansas City, New York. So New York's going to be the most important one, especially for African American culture. Next slide. You are going to get 200. You're going to have 200,000 African Americans living in New York by the 1920s. This thing is going to happen called the Harlem Renaissance. It's an artistic development, literature, music, art, politics. Through all these artistic mediums, they're going to show racial pride, political organization. This is just going to be a flowering of African American arts across different mediums. African Americans, they're this idea of the new Negro. They have their own place where they can express themselves. They can come up with their own literature. Their own music, their own ideas. People they're proud of being African American. They no longer have to feel like they're second-class citizens. When they're in Harlem, they're coming up with the most popular music in the country, the jazz. They're coming up with the most influential writing, the most influential everything. And it's not just for an African American audience. Whites are going to Harlem as well. They're experiencing African American culture. So this is like the high point of the Roaring '20s. You okay? I'll give you a second to. 1 second to write that down. Has anyone studied the Harlem Renaissance in any of your other classes?
Nope.
Nope. Maya, what do you know about, or what do you want to share about the Harlem Renaissance? What you studied? Did you study like art? Did you study writing? Art? Yeah, Jacob Boris. Likes to use. Yeah, I'll show you a painting in a minute. All right, I'm gonna move on to the next one. Is everyone okay with that?
No.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Next slide. So W.E.B. Du Bois. This is a quote. Josiah, can you read that for us?
We return from fighting. We return fighting.
Sorry, a little louder.
We return from fighting. We return fighting. Make way for democracy. We saved it in France, and by the great Jehovah, we will save it in the United States of America. Or know the reason why.
Yeah. So this is after World War I. African Americans, they fought bravely in World War I. They're coming back. They're going to assert their culture now. And W.E.B. Du Bois, he really believed that through education, through art, even though there was lynchings in the South, even though there was Jim Crow going on, through literature, through music, through all these things, you could create better rights for African Americans. Next slide. So W.E.B. Du Bois, he helped found the NAACP. He becomes editor of a magazine called The Crisis. The Crisis was a major outlet for African American writing and poetry. It promoted African American arts movement in New York. And this was like the central idea of the Harlem Renaissance. We're going to promote black poets, writers, musicians, all these things. The next slide, we're going to talk about Marcus Garvey. There's one thing to know. So the NAACP, it was the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, but it wasn't an exclusive organization for African Americans. There were whites that joined this organization. There were white philanthropists that gave money to this organization. The next organization was not.
How long did this guy live?
W.E.B. Du Bois?
I mean,
I forget. I think he died in the 50s?
what?
I'm not sure. I gotta look when he passed away. No, he's dead now. But
Of course he's dead now.
no, he's,
Very interesting if he was alive though. That would be
yeah. Okay, next slide.
No way.
All right, hold. Go back.
Please,
Go
please.
back. Come on. Come on, Maj, you got it? You okay? You got it? Kyle, next slide. Okay, the next guy we're going to talk about is Marcus Garvey. So Marcus Garvey, he was into the idea of black nationalism, black pride. There were two key things to remember from him. Self-reliance. He believed that African Americans, they had to make their own way in society without the help of whites. He came up with this Back to Africa movement. It was the idea that people from African descent, whether they were living in the Caribbean, like in Haiti or Jamaica or wherever, whether they were living in the United States, or whether they were living in South America, or whether they were living in the African continent, there was unity between all African people. He created the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Sorry, it should be UNIA, not UNIC. But so he thought that this organization, he wanted to help African Americans gain economic and political power by educating themselves. Remember we learned about Booker T. Washington earlier in the Tuskegee Institute? He, Marcus Garvey, he believed that African Americans, they needed education, they needed schooling, but he also believed in African nationalism. He was going to, you should have African American businesses, you should have, he promoted separation and independence from whites. He started this shipping company. You read about it in your warm-up, but it was the Black Star, and basically its goal was to ship goods just between people of African descent, whether they be like in the Caribbean or on the African continent, with African Americans living in the U.S. The United States government was very fearful of Marcus Garvey. The FBI, they had an investigation on him. They arrested him for mail fraud, which is kind of the key thing is it's sort of a...
Permission to get out of your seat right now? You do have permission to get out of your seat? You ask someone? No. So what I need from you is just to ask and not to wonder what you're doing. So
What do you need?
What do you need? So all you have to do is ask. There's tissue boxes back here.
Yeah, behind it.
Are you ready to show?
Black shelf.
I'm legally blind, I'm sorry.
Right there.
Oh,
Right here, tissues.
I didn't see that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so he was arrested. It was, mail fraud. It was a minor charge, but the government, they were looking to get him for something because they saw him as a threat with this black nationalism. This was the opposite of the NAACP. So his organization, they didn't have white members. So the government, they deported him to Jamaica in 1927. He's going to end up deported. It means they kick him out of the country. They say, he can't live in the U.S. anymore. He gets out of jail, but they deport him. That's sort of the most important thing to remember for the Harlem Renaissance is because of him, people are taking a lot of pride, black nationalism. They're taking pride in their education, in their art, in their culture, all these things. That people look to Marcus Garvey for. Yeah?
Is this UNIC, the association?
UNIA, I'm sorry. Yeah, this should be an A, not a C.
What?
See how I wrote, it's Universal Negro Improvement Association, and I wrote UNIC, it should say UNIA. Cool. Next slide?
No!
Yes.
That's what he looked like.
Does somebody want to read this quote from Marcus Garvey? Michaela?
Yeah.
People without the knowledge of the past history or human culture is like a tree without roots. Oh, I get it, there's roots and then there's
Yeah.
I get it.
So that's the African continent with the roots spreading out.
What I think is interesting is that no one none of the African Americans probably have ever been to Africa,
Right, I have.
right? Like, why is this a good solution?
Oh, I'm not.
Trash can? Go ahead.
I don't.
All right, let's move on. So during this era of the Roaring 20s, African Americans, they make huge strides in politics as well. When you have this huge, great migration, African Americans moving to northern cities, it's going to change the voting population in those cities. So for the first time, you're going to get a northern representative to Congress who's African American. This guy, Oscar de Priest, he was elected in Chicago. And this is historic. Yeah. Yeah, this is the first time this has ever happened. And then
Okay, let's see.
after the next couple slides, we're going to talk a little bit about like some writers, jazz musicians. You don't need to. I'm not going to ask you like to know each one and their whole life story. I'm going to give you a couple examples. Your homework over break, you're going to do your own investigation. So you'll get to know a few of them. And in your English classes, you'll read poetry from Langston Hughes. You'll go more in depth. But I'm basically just going to present you some names. But for your own benefit, you should research some of these people because they're amazing. All right, next slide. So some important writers: Claude McKay, the first important writer of the Harlem Renaissance. Langston Hughes. He was a writer, poet, wrote about Black defiance and hope. Zora Neale Hurston, she wrote some of the first major stories featuring African American women as central characters. Two characteristics of Harlem Renaissance writing: proud defiance, the idea of the new Negro, the educated. You're not a second-class citizen. You have culture. You have you're great. You can write. You can express yourself. And bitter contempt of racism. People, they were not. This is like the seeds have been planted for the civil rights movement in the '60s, and people they're not putting up with it anymore. Yes. Wait till the end of that. Okay. No. Give me a minute. Next slide. So here's some art. Here's some paintings that I like. I know in the last class, Dina, she said that you learned about Aaron Douglas last year. I'm not sure if anyone was in Dina's class. Maybe it was maybe Jacob Lawrence. But there's some really interesting art from this era from African Americans. This is like a city skyline from Harlem. You see jazz musicians here. These are like workers. Looks like they're traveling to like factories, group migration. Yep. That's some very interesting stuff.
I had some. What? Wait, there's not.
I'm really excited for
You did the neon green. It's
somebody
not
forgot
good
the
because it's not
Scantron.
reading very well on the
I
thing.
had.
So please just don't use it next time.
Hopefully. I'm really excited for the African American History Museum to finally open. That'll be
The museum doesn't look hot.
It's pretty neat. I think it's neat, but they keep delaying it. It was supposed to open. It was supposed to open like a year ago or 2 years ago. They keep delaying it.
It looks really cool.
Yeah.
It's not open.
Oh, let's keep going. We got a little bit more material to get through. Next slide. So we got one or two slides. Just want to make sure want to make sure I have Mina's attention. And make sure everyone in the back. Okay, so jazz music. So this is the first real American style of music that's going to appear at this time. It's going to develop from ragtime blues. You're going to have some awesome people: Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong. Yeah, you're going to have blues appear at this time. Bessie Smith, Empress of Blues. You've been there?
Yeah.
So this is interesting.
What do you need?
There's,
I'm not. Why would you ask that right now?
So there's, yeah, so you have these clubs. You'd have a place like the Cotton Club, the Savoy Ballroom, where these great African American artists were performing. You also had speakeasy. Does anyone know what a speakeasy is?
No.
You wanna give a guess?
I have a question, but you can come back.
Okay, Mina, you can answer. So what's a speakeasy?
It's like a place in a building where people go and they talk about things that they wouldn't talk about outside because people judge them.
It is a secret, so it's a secret
And it's
place.
secret, and sometimes the doorways are up
Yeah, it's secret. You're on the right track. What is it?
in the book.
Shh,
It was just
Silent.
Like kind of like.
Guys, I need everyone's attention.
There's
What
one
is
down
it
the
trying
street.
to answer?
There's a speakeasy right down the street.
What?
And do you know why you don't know that they're there?
It's secret.
Because there's no sign that announces it. There's no. Oh wait. hold on. So maybe you guys can try to find it. It's in Chinatown. There's no sign. You know about it because somebody else knows about it.
I know that.
Yeah, you know about. I know about it.
Have you been there?
I have not.
I went downstairs. The drinks are like $15.
Yeah, usually speakeasy are more expensive. They're much stronger drinks, so I don't really go to those. But why would they need a speakeasy during this time?
So woman can do
No,
question.
Amina,
because people needed a place to talk about issues.
no, why would they need a speakeasy?
What got passed? So what had just been outlawed?
Oh, the alcohol.
Alcohol. So it's prohibition. So prohibition. People need a secret place to be served alcohol for music, to party. So you had these big clubs like the Cotton Club, but then you also had speakeasies. You'd have to go and you give like a secret knock on the door and they'd let you in. It's a secret place. Exactly. They'd let you in. They would serve alcohol. They'd have parties. You'd have jazz music. Yeah.
Was Blues Alley, the club in Georgetown, was that around during the
I don't know. The oldest one that I know of in DC just closed. What's the name of it? I just had a.
HR 57.
What?
I don't know.
I just had a brain freeze. It's called. I had a brain freeze. I forget.
What does it start
I
with?
don't remember it, but it just. All right,
Blues
now,
Alley was founded in 1965.
next slide.
1965. So not no.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was your question?
So that is true that the boys that worked at the Cotton Club would have to sit and dine with the other.
Yeah. So Cotton Club. I believe Cotton Club was segregated. So Cotton Club was just with only white. But
Oh, that's why it's called.
yeah, well, no. But most of but you had African American performers. But a lot of the clubs they were mixed. And this was like the first time when you had these speakeasies and jazz clubs. In other places in society, they'd be segregated, but you were having races mixed together. So this is big at the time. So your activity, we got about 10 minutes. I'm going to show a video clip where you're going to have some question and answer. In addition, activity 1, this is kind of fun. I wrote down I got a dictionary of slang from the 1920s. So these are some funny words that they used, during the jazz age. Flappers would use these words. I want you to tell me a little bit about your spring break plan, but I want you to use some of these words. Catch me out, cheaters.
A fire extinguisher.
All right.
I'll take that.
Good.
Miss Coach said she's a fire
So